Hello everyone, I hope you're well. Welcome to my YouTube channel. And I'm now trying to blow a hair either off it's either on my screen, on my phone. Yes. So let's stop that now. So welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm going to create a card. I've finally done all my paperwork, yippee! So I can now create a card. I'm using a piece of Pink Frog super smooth card, 4 inches by 6 inches, which is what I sell online. I'm going to be using my stamping platform, and I'm also going to be using a 4-inch round gel plate. I've now got these online, and I'll explain why I've bought these online as well. Mainly because they fit on our 6 by 6 inch squares beautifully, but they also fit on our 4 by 6 inch cards as well, which is what I wanted. So I like it when they work with things that we've already got. So I've got my gel press. I'm going to use the Abutilon stamp, and I'm going to use the mini oxide, crackling campfire, spiced marmalade and lumberjack plaid. So I'm going to use those colours from the mini ones, and I'm going to take my fan brush as well. So I'm going to start with the lightest colour, which in this case is spiced marmalade. So let's add a little bit of spiced marmalade. And really, I'm not covering the whole gel plate because I really want it sort of as an area to stamp into. So that's spiced marmalade. I'm going to use crackling campfire. So the crackling campfire is a little bit less than the spiced marmalade. And then the lumberjack plaid is even less still. So just around the edges. Then we can come back with the spiced marmalade and just add a little bit more of that spiced marmalade. And this will sort of frame everything. I'm then going to take some water. So let's take our water. And then we'll just come in and we'll add a few little splatters of water, a little bit more water. And then we'll just dab that. You can obviously put this in a paint palette if you've got a little bit more space than maybe I have. So you can add your water into a paint palette just to make it a little bit easier. I try not to have too many things on the desk so that it doesn't get over cluttered. That's the only reason I don't have some things on my desk, because then it's a little bit calmer when you're creating. It's not cluttered. So I've got my 4 by 6 inch card. You can put your gel press onto a acrylic block if you wish. It's entirely up to you. If you find that a little bit easier putting it on an acrylic block, because you can really hold it then and it won't slip out of your hand. So we'll just press lightly just around the gel press. It's up to you how hard you press that. But the only thing I like to do is I like to just give it a little bit longer, just for that gel press, just to rest on there and give the actual Distress Oxides a little bit longer to absorb onto the surface, because I just want it to stay around the edge. I don't really want it to come into the centre. I want to leave some of that centre free. And let's just lift this up so you can see. So you can lift that up, and then we can just pull our card away, or you can simply just tip it up and lift it. So then you will get a 2nd generation print. Let me just grab another piece of card. So you can then spritz your gel press, and you should be able to get a 2nd generation print. So let's grab that again. And you should have a 2nd generation print with your gel press. Again, just give it a few moments just to absorb onto the surface. so that a lot of the colour does remain on the surface and you don't lift it up and then most of it's still on the gel press. Just give it a few moments just to absorb onto that surface. Then you can lift, and then you've got a second generation print. To be honest, you could even get a third generation, absolutely. And they're beautiful. The second and third generation prints are just lovely. So I would recommend doing those anyway, because then you've got an extra background that you can create with. So that's beautiful, just like this is, but we haven't finished with that one. So we'll place that on one side. And you can then, we're going to grab our brush. Where's my round one? So let's grab that round brush. Make sure there's no other colour in there. And then I'm just going to encourage this just to bleed a little bit. So I'm just taking some water and I'm just going to encourage those edges just to soften a little bit with some water, just so that they bleed out a little bit, just to soften the edges. Now, by all means, you could just spray this, but obviously it will wick out a lot quicker. But I like to give you several options. So you can just wet it and allow it to bleed out. You just touch the colour and it will bleed out, no problem at all. Or you can spritz and it will wick a lot quicker. So it's entirely up to you. Obviously, if you spritz, you've got all that water on there, and you obviously need to dry it because you've got lots of water on there, but it does sort of wick out rather nicely, which is what I really love. But it's entirely up to you which choice you go with. So let's take our heat tool, and then we can just give this a waft dry. Just so that now it's moved, we can, and I'm quite happy with the movement, I can then just stop that and give it a dry. There we go. Again, you can quite easily dab some of your ink. If you just want it a little bit gently, you can dab some of your ink. Again, it's entirely up to you, but it's lovely when you've got options. What I'm going to do then is I'm going to take my stamping platform. Doesn't matter what stamping platform you've got, because the stamping platform is going to allow me to stamp over and over and over. So let's just place that in the top corner, because then I know where that is. I don't tend to use my stamping platform very much, apart from if I'm doing certain techniques, then I often get the stamping platform out. And I always have more magnets than you probably need, because again, that's me, because I just like to make sure it's completely secure. And I'm going to take my Abutilon stamp. So let's look at this. This is how well used it is. So I'm going to use the Abutilon. So we're taking this Abutilon here. So I'm going to decide where I want that. It's all grubby, my stamp is. So I'm going to add, let's have that there. Now my stamp is quite well used. If your stamp's a little bit stickier, then just bear that in mind. Make sure you've got plenty of magnets on there. There we go. Let's move everything out of the way, just so that we're not under pressure with everything everywhere. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use the light colour, which is Spiced Marmalade. I'm going to ink all over my stamp. And then I'm going to use some blueprint sketch. I'm going to use some lumberjack plaid. Don't ask me where I got blueprint sketch from. So I'm just dabbing this just with a little bit of the red. Okay. And then I'm going to bring this in, and I can just stamp that once, just press that once. And now you don't have to worry if you haven't got a perfect impression. That doesn't matter. So what I can do now is I can bring in, obviously, let's put the moisture here so that you can see. Let me have a look. So you can see I've got a little bit of water here. Going to bring in my kitchen roll like I always do. And then I'm just going to loosen some of the colour, just so that it looks a little bit shaded, just here and there. So we want them shades there. And you can just sort of loosen the colour a little bit. Now, again, I'm showing you that you can do it with your brush very gently if you wish. Or, like me, now I should have put kitchen roll underneath, but I haven't. So I'm going to spritz this now with water. Let me just dab this, make sure it's not got loads of moisture everywhere. So I'm just going to dab that. And then I'm just going to give that a light waft with this. And then I'm just going to take the... Do I want my permanent one? Do you know, I talk to myself all the time. Where have you gone? Bear with me. So then I just want... It'll be, I bet you any money, it'll be the last colour I pick up. Yep, told you it's going to be the last colour. In fact, it's so much the last colour, I can't even see it. There we go. So I've left the Distress Oxide ink on there, and you can just go back and add some more with that if you wish. But I'm going to take this off. So I've taken the Distress Oxide off so that it doesn't affect my permanent ink. So I've got all this, you know, moisture on here. I'm just going to dab a little bit of the moisture off there. There we go. Now I'm going to bring a little bit more definition to my Abutilon. So I'm going to use Strawberry Versafine Clair. So let's take that strawberry. Bring in that strawberry. And then I can just tap that very lightly if I wish. I can come in again and tap again. So it's entirely up to you if you how many times you stamp that on there. Now what this will do, it will give definition, but this is going to be the easiest way ever to colour. You've not used any coloured pencils. You've literally used some inks. That's it. Nothing more complicated than that. And you've actually coloured it with the Distress Oxides by making the colours bleed. You can also come in again and spritz again and make the colour bleed even more if you wish, because that won't affect the permanent ink, because that's exactly what it is. It's permanent. So you can then just give that a slight waft, dry. I'm just going to dry my magnets. Just give that a dry. Again, you can dab any excess moisture that you perhaps don't want on there. Okay, and then you can bring a little bit more definition. So let's take the red off there. And this time I'm going to bring some light touches of Portobello. So if I take a very light touch of Portobello, and the only thing I'm going to do with that Portobello is I'm just going to let the stamp kiss that surface. So just touch the surface, press very lightly, just to give it a little bit more definition and a bit more contrast of colour. Again, you can come in and press if you want it a little bit darker in certain areas. You can then wipe again. So you can see how many times you can do this. And obviously that's the advantage of a stamp press. A stamp. Yeah, do you know, I was wondering what I was saying then. So I can go back in, I can add the red again. And I'm just giving the Abutilon real oomph and definition. So it really stands out. And that just works beautifully. Nice, simple technique, nothing too complicated. So I can't recommend a stamping platform enough for that technique because it works really nicely. So I do love that. So we'll take off the large Abutilon. And then what I can do is I can bring in my acetate and just see if I want to use the small Abutilon so that it's at the top. Can you see? So I can use the small Abutilon and I can faff around as much as I want because I've got my stamping platform, so I can get it in the right place first. So I can use the little Abutilon. There we go. Just so they give that a little bit of grounding. And then again, I can come in with the spiced marmalade. Let's add some of that spiced marmalade. And it won't show up with much with the spiced marmalade because you can see you're going onto that orange surface. So then we'll get some lumberjack plaid. But this will be sort of the underneath colours. So some of the lumberjack plaid, and it's getting a little bit more. And I don't need to spritz this much because it's actually got quite a bit of moisture on there. So let's give that a dry. And again, I'm aware that you might not be able to see much because it's a tone on tone colour. So let's just mop up some extra of that moisture. Let's wipe off that oxide. And let's come in with our VersaFine Clair strawberry. Let's take the strawberry. Now I'm using my permanent ink. And I've got the colour underneath, so it's already coloured. I don't have to worry about colouring the image. But you can still see I've got that oxide in there and there's still not enough definition. So then I don't have to worry. I can come in with the Portobello. Let's just take the red off there. I can come in with the Portobello and add the Portobello. Because you want to bring in some of that lined detail. That's what you want to bring in. Some of the lined detail. You can also, let's bring in the moisture here. You can bring in this here. Let's get this kitchen roll. Not that there's much dry on there. And you can also sort of bleach out some of your areas as well. So if you want to bleach out some of your colour, you can also bleach out some of the colour again. So this, with you using your stamping platform, you've got a few more options just to give you a little bit more scope with your floral. So I'm going to come in again with my Portobello, and it's wonderful because you don't have to feel rushed and you don't have to move this out until you're really happy with what you have. So I've got some lovely definition back in there, just so you can see that. So the card, you can leave it quite easily like that. It's entirely up to you. So you've got a nice simple way of colouring, should you wish. Let's move all these off now. Don't put your magnets together, which is what I end up doing, and then you can't get them apart from them pink ones, which you can. Okay. I'll just give this another waft dry, just so that I'm not working on total moisture. and you've got something you can work with quite easily. It just works with no effort whatsoever. So then, if you want to leave it like that, you can, but then if you want to sort of take it up a level, you can then bring in your pencils. So if I bring in a really dark colour and this red here, which is lovely, I think we'll just work with the two colours, do you think? Do you think, Tracy? You can't make your mind up, can you? Okay. Now, the reason for doing that method is to show you that if you haven't got pencils, or pencils are not your cup of tea, then you don't have to use your pencils. The pencils are obviously going to give a little bit more definition. If you would like that definition, they just bring in a little bit more definition to your florals, should you wish to have that definition. And really, you only have to have a touch of colour. You see, this one for me, it's fine. You can just leave it like that. But say your little one, you wanted it to just have a little bit more colour, you can just touch that with some of your pencils. I'll discuss the colours shortly. So I've got Crimson Lake 925 and Crimson Red 924, and then there's the yellow orange PC 1002. So it's entirely up to you if you bring a little bit of that colour in, maybe to your smaller one, but you don't have to add any to this one shouldn't you wish, because there's plenty of beautiful colour on there. You don't have to bring any in if you don't wish. But if you do like colouring, as you know I do, then you can come in and just add a little bit of your colours, your dark, your medium, and then a little bit of your light. But because you've gone over so many times, you're not obliterating those lines, which if you see in Abutilon, some Abutilons, not all, have got this dark veining and it looks lovely. I've also got a little Abutilon that's very thin and fine, not quite as bulbous as this one. So there are lots of varieties. So I'm going to come in and just, so all you've done is stamp and ink. So if you want something really simple, you can't go wrong using this method. And if you've got sort of a stamping platform, gathering dust, grab that out and give it a go. So that's our dark colour. Let's come in with the light colour. And then with the little bit of orange. And you can see that initially I am colouring very lightly, so I'm not sort of obliterating anything. But I always think that if you're a bit frightened with colouring, why don't you try light layers initially and don't worry about blending initially. Just get used to the feel of your pencils. And even if you only do some light shading, it makes a big difference. Just enjoy that process. Don't stress too much about what the end outcome is going to be. As long as you've enjoyed that process, that's the main thing. You should be enjoying the process. Let's bring in that second colour. But you can see I've still got those beautiful lines on there. I'm not obliterating those lines. And you can also see the quality of the card in that it's not breaking down. I added all that moisture and it's not breaking down. So you can just add a little bit more definition. Don't panic too much about having to have perfection. So let's grab a really dark colour. No idea what colour this is. What colour are you? No, I do not want terracotta. What about, what colour's that? Dark purple. And you're probably thinking, what, Tracy, dark purple? But sometimes dark purple or your blues, depending which you're using, which colours you're using, can give a lovely bit of shading. So just give a little bit of purple under there, and it can just make it look a little bit more defined because you've got that darker edge just under there. So it just defines it a little bit more. You can define the edges here where it comes down, and that is often darker, but by just adding that little bit of dark colour, it just gives a little bit more definition. And we'll just come in and blend that with our colour, our Crimson Lake. So the Crimson Lake is blending into the dark colour, which is dark purple 931. But sometimes purple just gives that little bit of shading. And then, so with this one, I'm not sort of necessarily giving it that, you know, that where I'm super bothered about a wonderful blend. This just doesn't really need it in some ways. So let's just come and add a little bit more definition. There we go. So we've got, let's also extend our branch as well, just so that it looks connected. There we go. Then they're all connected. So then you've got part of your project then. We'll now add a little bit of background stamping. So I'm going to use my trusty TE11. So let's add the trusty TE11. I'm going to take that TE11 and I'm going to use some strawberry just to add some little touches of text in strawberry. This is TE11, and just add a little bit of text to that. And again, I automatically get that beautiful botanical feel by adding a little bit of text. It just works beautifully. So it's the strawberry that I'm using for that. And sometimes it's nice just to stamp on to the floral a little bit. And that looks lovely as well. Let's just add a little bit more there and a little bit there. So you can see it just gives it that botanical feel. I don't know why I'm cleaning that, because that's a permanent ink. So let's just give that a dry. And the only reason I'm giving that a dry is because you've got that Distress Oxide ink on there. So I'm giving that a little bit of a dry so that we don't have any smudges. I'll just leave that out for the moment. Let's put that over there and then we know where it is. And which one do I want to go with now? So if I bring in TE44, a myriad of designs, and if I want to, I can stamp something with black over the top, because the black will be stronger in colour than the colours I've used in the background. Let's just give that. So I'm going to grab my black Nocturne in a second, and what I'm thinking is I can just add my little bird onto the actual floral. So let's take our actual bird. Let's just stamp that on there. Now, you could use your stamping platform so that you could go over and over again until you get that depth of black colour onto your background piece, which is probably a lot easier. So I'm just allowing this just to absorb onto the surface of that card. There we go. Very good. I'm going to give that a dry because I've stamped straight onto the oily ink, and I've stamped onto the Prisma. That's what comes with using too many different pencils. But then you've got your little bird. My camera can't focus, it's because I've got this in the background. There we go. You've got the little bird in the background. I'm then going to take the other bird, that faces the other way. There you are. Let's take that. Always make sure you pick up the right ink pad, because you know how many times I've picked up the wrong ink pad. Also make sure your stamp's not going to fall off. So we'll just add our little bird here, looking at the floral. So just give that a few seconds, because you really have got the oxide ink down there. So you just need to not be in a rush to lift that up. Just lovely. So again, I'm just going to give that a little bit of a dry, mainly because we've got that oxide inks on there, and the VersaFine Clair is that oily ink, and you want to make sure that you're not going to smudge that. We just need to ground our little bird, just so that that's not floating. Let's take a little bit of water. And I only need a little touch of water, just to, and then take that off, just to ground that a little bit. So it just then works quite nicely. With just having those little birds on there, just gives that a little pop of the black. I'm then going to take a little, you can add a little bit of shading under here. You can either use your Inktense pencil, or you can go in with your really dark Inktense. Oh, stop calling it Inktense. Prisma. Or you can go in with your Prisma, and you can just add a little bit of shading just with your Prisma as well. It's entirely up to you. It's a little bit more subtle with your Prisma, especially if you do it really lightly. So it's very subtle, just with that light touch of the Prisma, just to give that a little bit of shading. Or you can go in with your Inktense, which is a little bit more, you know, intense. Take a little bit of water, and then you can just add a little bit of the shading just underneath. Now that Inktense is permanent once dry, so let's just add a little bit around here and a little bit around there. The touches of shading just bring everything to life. They just give it a little bit more dimension, because your flat cards don't have, you know, you can still add dimension without having bulk. So you don't have to have bulk just because that you want a little bit of dimension. You can just do that with some of your pencils, whichever works easier for you. We're then going to take, shall we have some, let's have some of our bleed proof white. So you could have finished this card at the 20-minute mark quite easily by just not adding any pencil work at all and just keeping it nice and simple, which is absolutely fine. So I'm just going to add a few touches of my white, just so that you've got a few little pops of that colour. You don't have to go overboard, you're just adding a few touches of that white. You know, it doesn't necessarily need loads. You can just add little bits here and there just to highlight a few areas, just to bring everything to life. So you can just highlight a few of the lined areas on your card and it just comes to life a little bit by just adding a few little touches of white. And you really don't have to add much. The hardest bit is when to stop. And as you can see, Tracy's really not got that off to a T because she just carries on. Right, let's clean that. It's just something about white touches. I just love them. So let's give that a little bit of a clean. Just clean my brush. And then we will add some splatters. So we'll add our splatters before we add any wording. So I'm using a Posca pen, and that's far too difficult just to get that Posca pen going. I don't want to spend ages trying to shake the Posca paint. That's better. And you can then just give that a little bit of a dry, just so that it doesn't continue to react with the background too much. You don't want it to react with that background too much. And again, if the splatters aren't enough, you can still add that paint by adding layers. So let's give that a dry again. And the only reason I'm drying the Posca paint is so that it doesn't react too much. So let's take that off. And then we want to add wording. So we'll just place this one back so I can not got too much on my desk. And then we'll come to the Abutilon again, and we've got nodding flowers, which is exactly what the Abutilon is. And then I'm just going, let's make sure it stays on there. I'm just going to practice a little bit, where I want. See, I don't want it there because it's out of my circle, if that makes sense. For me, it actually looks best there, but I don't want to cover up too much of that floral. See, I like it there. So I'm going to add, we all see things differently. And don't stress if something doesn't work. There's always a way we can sort of work around it. So with your sentiment, if we don't like it, we can easily cut one out. So it's not too much of a problem. And you can see I'm not pressing this too hard. I'm just giving that a bit of time because it's got a lot of layers on there. So I'm just giving that sentiment a little bit of time just so that you can see. And my camera refuses. Come on. I wonder if the light's not good. Let me just turn this. Let's bring that down there, see if you can, there we go. But it's still not focusing. I don't know what it's focusing on, but I'm like, focus, focus. I have no idea why it's doing that. But there you go, you've got nodding flowers on there. Now, I like that, but it doesn't stand out enough. So, like I said, we don't panic because we think, yeah, it looks okay. It just doesn't stand out enough. So then I can bring in another piece of card and we can then just stamp this now onto a plain piece of white card. Don't be frightened to change your mind, which I frequently do, as you well know. So let's cut that out. This is not going to add too much bulk to that card, which is, if you want to send them in the post, might be something that you are concerned about. But this won't add too much bulk at all. So now, if I look through the camera, oh, that Abutilon looks beautiful. And then I add the white, now that pops against the background. So don't be frightened to change your mind. That's what being creative is all about. So let's just add, let's add our nodding flowers. And it works every time. Just brilliant. There we go. Give that a couple of seconds just to adhere on there. But you see that pops instantly just on there. And you can see a bit of light here. I do apologise. That's a light on just so that we can see clearly what we're doing. You can then also come in, let's just grab this. And if you want a little bit more detail, you can come in with your Posca pen, especially if it works. You can come in with your Posca pen and you can still add more highlights if you wish onto your floral. This one's just beautiful. So don't be frightened to come in each time and just add a little bit more detail should you wish to add more detail. I'm going to add a little bit of shading under my text. And again, you really don't need much moisture. Let's just take the extra off. So you can just, and it'll move beautifully because you've got that quality card, so it moves. And that just gives me a little shadow under there. You can also add a little bit of shadowing under here if you wish as well. So if you want to add a little bit of shadowing under here, just start off nice and gentle and don't add too much, just add a little bit initially. And then you can decide if you would like it a little bit darker. So again, that's entirely up to you. And blending it a little bit with your background colour as well, just so that that's a little bit softer. There we go. Don't need that. And then if we add this to our black mat, that's going to make that pop on that black mat really nicely. So let's take, now you could do this, try this design in different colour schemes, and it makes a massive difference when you try it with different colour schemes. So you could try it all with different colour combinations from your oxides. It means you're using your oxides and you're using your inks a little bit more. So let's place that down. Again, if you use your double-sided tape, this will grab hold instantly, and you're not going to be trying to, like me, stick this down and it keep moving, because once you tear your double-sided tape away, it will just stick for good, grabbing all the curvature of the card as well. It's just what we all get used to. Just going to rub the centre of that card to make sure that's stuck down. I'm then going to add that to a 5x7 card blank. Let's bring this in. And when I stand up, I find it a little bit easier. There we go. And it's just beautiful. You've got a 1-layer card apart from your sentiment. Apart from that sentiment, it works as a 1-layer card. And it's just a lovely, simple way to colour your florals if it's something that you're not particularly keen on. So I hope you enjoyed a little creative time together, and I look forward to seeing you all soon. So bye for now. Bye everyone.